The alarm bells rang through Luna Station like the screams of dying worlds. Admiral Taman stood in the command center, watching the red lights flash across every screen. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. The Valthran Dominion was coming. Taman had seen war before. He had fought pirates in the Outer Rings and stopped rebellions on Mars. But this was different. This was the end of everything. "Sir, we have Captain Heejin on the line," said Lieutenant Boram from her station. She just returned from the Kepler system. "Put her through," Taman said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. Captain Heejin's face appeared on the main screen. Her ship, the Silent Dawn, was one of the fastest scouts in the human fleet. She had been sent to watch the outer systems for signs of the Dominion. Now she was back, and the look in her eyes told Taman everything he needed to know. "Admiral," Heejin said, "they're coming. I saw their fleet at the edge of the Kepler system. It's massive. Bigger than anything we've ever seen." Taman nodded slowly. "How many ships?" "I stopped counting at 5,000, Heejin replied. "Their smallest ships are the size of our biggest battleships." "Their largest ships?" "Admiral, they're the size of small moons. I watched one of them destroy an asteroid with a single shot. The asteroid was 20 kilometers wide. It just disappeared. The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Valthran Dominion had been moving across the galaxy for 200 years. Every civilization they met was destroyed or enslaved. The crystalline hegemony had the best shields in the galaxy. They fell in 3 days. The symbiotic collective could grow new ships from living matter. They lasted a week. The quantum architects could bend reality itself. They were gone in 5 days. "How long do we have?" Taman asked. 6 weeks, Heejin said. "Maybe less." "They're moving fast." Taman closed his eyes for a moment. 6 weeks to prepare for the end of humanity. 6 weeks to figure out how to fight an enemy that had never lost a battle. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "Get some rest. We'll need you ready for what comes next." The screen went dark. Taman turned to face his staff. Every face in the room looked scared. They all knew the numbers. Earth's entire fleet had 1,200 ships. That sounded like a lot until you compared it to the 5,000 ships Heejin had seen. And those were just the ones she could count. "Get me President Namsu," Taman said. "Emergency meeting. Full council." 2 hours later, Taman stood in the council chambers on Earth. President Namsu sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the leaders of every nation on Earth. The room was full of whispers and worried faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," Namsu said, "Admiral Taman has something to tell us." Taman stood up. He had given many briefings before, but none like this. "The Valthran Dominion is coming. We have 6 weeks to prepare. Their fleet is at least 5,000 ships strong. Each of their ships is larger and more powerful than anything we have." The room exploded into noise. People shouted questions, demanded answers, argued with each other. Namsu banged his gavel until they were quiet again. "What are our chances?" asked the representative from North America. Taman was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly? None. If we fight them the way they expect us to fight, we'll lose in hours." "Then what do we do?" asked the representative from Europe. "We don't fight them the way they expect," said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at Dr. Ki Young. She was the head of the Theoretical Weapons Division. She was young, barely 30, but she was also the smartest person in the room. "Explain," Namsu said. Ki Young stood up. "Every civilization the Dominion has conquered fought them the same way. Big fleets meeting in space. The side with more ships and better weapons wins. But that's not the only way to fight a war." "What do you mean?" Taman asked. "I mean, we don't meet them with a fleet," Ki Young said. "We meet them with something they've never seen before. Something they can't prepare for because they don't know it's possible." "You're talking about the prototype," said General Dong Hyun. He was the head of military research. Ki Young nodded. "The Defiant Spirit. We've been working on it for 5 years. It's not ready, but we can make it ready." "One ship," said the representative from Asia. "You want to fight 5,000 ships with one ship?" "Not fight," Ki Young said. "Change the rules. Every war the Dominion has fought has been about size and power. Who has the bigger fleet? Who has the stronger weapons? But what if we don't play that game?" Taman was starting to understand. "You're talking about something completely different." "I'm talking about a ship that doesn't follow the rules," Ki Young said. "A ship that can be in 10 places at once. A ship that can phase through solid matter. A ship that can think faster than any biological mind. That's impossible. said someone from the back of the room. So was faster than light travel, Ki-young replied. So was artificial gravity. So was human consciousness surviving in space. We've done impossible things before. President Namsu was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. Dr. Ki-young, do you really think this could work? I think it's our only chance, she said. The Dominion expects us to meet them with everything we have. They expect massive battles and brave last stands. They don't expect one ship doing something that should be impossible. How long would you need? Taemin asked. 6 weeks, Ki-young said. Exactly 6 weeks. The room was silent again. Everyone understood what she was saying. They had exactly enough time to try something that had never been done before. If it worked, maybe humanity would survive. If it didn't, they would die just like every other civilization the Dominion had conquered. All right, Namsu said finally. Dr. Ki-young, you have whatever you need. Money, people, resources, anything. What about our regular fleet? Asked General Dong-hyun. We'll prepare them too, Taemin said. But they won't be the main plan. Dr. Ki-young's ship will be. As the meeting broke up, Taemin found himself standing next to Ki-young. Doctor, he said quietly, can this really work? Ki-young looked at him with tired eyes. Admiral, I honestly don't know. But I know that meeting them with conventional tactics is suicide. This is something different. Something they've never seen. Sometimes that's enough. Outside the council chambers, Earth continued its normal day. People went to work, children went to school, families ate dinner together. They didn't know that in 6 weeks everything would change. They didn't know that their survival depended on a young scientist's impossible dream. But in the research labs scattered across the solar system, work had already begun. The defiant spirit would be ready. It had to be, because the alternative was the end of everything humanity had ever built. The countdown had started. 6 weeks to save the world. Commander Junho had never seen anything like the chaos in the research station. Scientists ran between machines that hummed and sparked with dangerous energy. Engineers shouted orders over the noise of welding and construction. The air smelled of hot metal and burning electronics. How much time do we have left? Junho asked Dr. Ki-young. 4 weeks, she replied without looking up from her computer screen. The Dominion fleet is moving faster than we thought. Junho walked around the massive shape in the center of the station. The defiant spirit was unlike any ship humanity had ever built. It was small, only 200 meters long. Most human warships were at least 5 times that size, but this ship wasn't meant to carry large crews or massive weapons. It was meant to do something that should be impossible. The quantum tunneling drive is ready, said Engineer Wu Jin from across the room. We can phase through solid matter for up to 30 seconds at a time. What about the consciousness transfer system? Junho asked. Dr. Mi-young looked up from her workstation. She was Ki-young's sister, but where Ki-young worked on weapons, Mi-young worked on minds. It's complicated. We can upload human consciousness into the ship's computer, but we can't guarantee what will happen to the person. What do you mean? Junho asked. I mean, they might not be entirely human anymore when we're done, Mi-young said. The consciousness will merge with the ship's artificial intelligence. They'll be faster, smarter, able to process information at incredible speeds. But there'll also be something new. Junho nodded slowly. He had volunteered to be part of the crew, knowing it might change him forever. They all had. Captain Sora, Navigator Yujin, Engineer Woojin, and a dozen others. They knew they might not survive. They knew that even if they did survive, they might not be the same people afterward. It's worth it, said a voice behind him. Junho turned to see Captain Sora walking toward them. She was the most decorated pilot in the human fleet. She had fought in the Titan Wars and survived battles that killed thousands of other soldiers. If anyone could make this impossible mission work, it was her. Captain, Junho said, are you ready for this? Sora looked at the defiant spirit. I've been ready for 30 years. Ever since I first learned to fly, I knew someday I'd have to do something impossible. This is it. Across the solar system, the regular human fleet was preparing for battle too. Admiral Taemin commanded 1,200 ships of all sizes. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, fighters. They were good ships with brave crews, but everyone knew they couldn't win a normal battle against the Dominion. Sir, said Lieutenant Boram from her station on the flagship, we're receiving long-range scans of the Dominion fleet. Taemin looked at the screen. The enemy fleet was massive beyond belief. Each ship was marked with a different color based on its size. Red for the largest ships, yellow for medium ships, blue for the smallest. The screen was mostly red. How many? He asked. 8,000 ships, Boram said quietly. The scouts were wrong. It's even bigger than we thought. Taman closed his eyes. 8,000 ships against 1,200. And that was if everything went perfectly. If every human ship survived long enough to fight. In reality, they'd be lucky if half their fleet lasted 10 minutes. Sir, said Communications Officer Sungmin. Message from the research station. Dr. Ki-young wants to speak with you. Ki-young's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. Admiral, she said, we need to talk about the plan. Go ahead, Doctor. The Defiant Spirit will be ready in 2 weeks. But we need the fleet to do something specific when the Dominion arrives. What do you need? We need you to stay back, Ki-young said. Don't engage the enemy fleet directly. Let them come into the solar system. Let them get close to Earth. Taman frowned. Doctor, that goes against every military principle I know. We should meet them as far from Earth as possible. I know it sounds wrong, Ki-young said, but the Defiant Spirit needs them to be bunched together. If they spread out across the whole solar system, we can't use their own size against them. Use their size against them? The ship is designed to move between enemy vessels, Ki-young explained. To hide among them and turn their weapons against each other. But that only works if they're close together. Taman was quiet for a long moment. Everything in his training told him to fight the enemy as far from home as possible. But everything in his experience told him that normal tactics wouldn't work against the Dominion. All right, he said finally. We'll do it your way. But Doctor, this better work. It has to work, Ki-young said. Because if it doesn't, we're all dead anyway. Meanwhile, the Dominion fleet continued its approach toward Earth. On the flagship, Fleet Commander Vex Thanor studied the reports about humanity. They were a young species, barely 1,000 years old. They had only been in space for a few centuries. Their technology was primitive compared to most galactic civilizations. This should be easy, said his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Thekvar. Their largest fleet has only 1,200 ships. We could destroy them with a single battle group. Never underestimate an enemy, Vex Thanor replied. But you're right. This will be our fastest conquest yet. Vex Thanor had conquered 17 civilizations for the Dominion. Some had fought bravely, others had surrendered immediately. But they all had one thing in common. They fought conventionally. Large fleets meeting in space, the side with more ships and better technology winning. What's our standard approach? He asked Thekvar. Jump into their system with the full fleet, Thekvar said. Demand surrender. When they refuse, destroy their military forces quickly and efficiently. Occupy their planets and good. Begin final preparations. In 2 weeks, we'll add another species to the Dominion. Back on Earth, Dr. Mi-young was making the final adjustments to the consciousness transfer system. It was the most complex piece of technology humanity had ever created. It could take a human mind and upload it into a computer, allowing the person to think at the speed of machines while still keeping their human creativity and intuition. The risk is enormous, she told the volunteer crew. We don't know what will happen to your minds. You might lose parts of your memory. You might not be able to return to normal human consciousness. You might not even survive the process. We understand, said Captain Sora. But without this, we can't make the ship work fast enough. Mi-young nodded. The Defiant Spirit needed to move and react faster than any biological crew could manage. It needed to phase in and out of reality, dodge weapons moving at near light speed, and process battlefield information in real time. Only a hybrid human-computer consciousness could do that. When do we start? Asked Navigator Yujin. Tomorrow, Mi-young said. The process takes a week. After that, you'll be connected to the ship permanently. Are you sure you want to do this? The crew looked at each other. They all knew what they were giving up. Their normal human lives, their families, their futures, but they also knew what they were fighting for. We're sure, Sora said. The next day, the consciousness transfer began. One by one, the crew members lay down on special tables connected to the ship's main computer. Electrodes were attached to their heads. Slowly, carefully, their minds were copied and uploaded into the Defiant Spirit systems. Junho was the first to undergo the process. He felt his consciousness expand, becoming something larger than just his own mind. He could feel the ship around him, every system and circuit. He could process information faster than he ever thought possible. But he was still himself, still human at his core. How do you feel? Dr. Mi-young asked. Different, Junho said. His voice came from the ship's speakers now. But still it's hard to explain. One by one, the rest of the crew joined him. Soon, the Defiant Spirit had a crew unlike anything that had ever existed. They were human, but more than human. They were individuals, but also part of something larger. System check, said Captain Sora. Her consciousness was now distributed throughout the ship's command systems. All systems. Operational, replied Engineer Wu Jin from the ship's engines. Navigation. Ready, said Yu Jin from the navigation computers. For the first time in galactic history, a ship truly was alive. The Defiant Spirit could think, feel, and react like a living being, but it could also calculate, process, and respond like a machine. In 1 week, it would face the largest invasion fleet in galactic history, 8,000 ships against one. But that one ship would be something the galaxy had never seen before. The countdown continued. 1 week to save humanity. The Dominion fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a storm of metal and death. 8,000 ships spread across space in perfect formation. Their smallest vessels were twice the size of Earth's largest battleships. Their largest ships blocked out the stars themselves. Fleet Commander Vex Thanor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. The ship was 15 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. Around him, 7,999 other ships waited for his orders. Scan the system, he commanded. Yes, sir, replied the sensor officer. Sir, this is strange. I'm only detecting one ship moving to intercept us. Vex Thanor frowned. One ship? Where is their fleet? The human fleet is holding position near their home planet, the officer said. But there's a single vessel approaching our position. It's small, sir. Very small. On the main screen, the image of the Defiant Spirit appeared. Compared to the massive Dominion ships, it looked like a tiny insect flying toward a herd of elephants. Are they surrendering? Asked Subcommander Thekvar. Unknown, sir. The ship isn't responding to our communications. Vex Thanor had conquered 17 civilizations, but he had never seen anything like this. Every other species had met his fleets with everything they had. Thousands of ships, desperate battles, brave last stands. This single ship made no sense. Maybe it's carrying a surrender message, Thekvar suggested. Perhaps, Vex Thanor said. But stay alert. Something feels wrong about this. Inside the Defiant Spirit, Captain Sora felt the ship's systems humming around her consciousness. She was no longer just a human sitting in a pilot's seat. She was the ship. Every sensor was her eye. Every weapon was her hand. Every engine was her heartbeat. Enemy fleet in range, reported Navigator Yu Jin. Her consciousness flowed through the ship's navigation systems like water. 8,014 ships. They're maintaining standard attack formation. Perfect, said Engineer Wu Jin from deep in the ship's quantum engines. They're bunched together just like Dr. Ki Young predicted. Commander Junho's awareness spread across all the ship's systems at once. He could feel the massive enemy fleet ahead of them, sense their weapons powering up, detect their confusion at facing a single small ship. Remember, Sora said to her crew, we're not trying to destroy them all. We're trying to make them destroy each other. The Defiant Spirit approached the center of the Dominion formation. To the alien commanders, it looked like suicide. One tiny ship flying directly into the middle of the largest fleet in galactic history. Sir, the sensor officer reported to Vex Thanor. The human ship is entering our formation. Destroy it, Vex Thanor ordered. Thousands of weapons fired at once. Energy beams that could crack moons. Projectiles that could punch through asteroids, missiles that could level cities. All aimed at one small ship. But the Defiant Spirit was no longer where the weapons were aimed. Sora activated the quantum phasing drive. In an instant, the ship shifted out of normal space-time. The massive barrage of weapons passed harmlessly through the space where it had been. What? Vex Thanor stared at the screen. Where did it go? The Defiant Spirit reappeared behind one of the Dominion's largest battleships. For exactly 2.3 seconds, it was solid and vulnerable. That was long enough for Engineer Wu Jin to fire a single precise shot at the battleship's reactor shielding. The shot itself barely scratched the massive alien ship, but it created a tiny hole in the reactor's protective barrier. When the battleship's own defensive systems detected the damage, they automatically sealed the hole by ejecting superheated plasma. The plasma cloud expanded rapidly, engulfing 3 nearby Dominion cruisers. Their shields failed under the unexpected attack from their own ally. Explosions rippled through their hulls. Impossible, whispered Thekvar. How did they? The defiant spirit phased out again before anyone could target it. It reappeared on the other side of the formation, behind a cluster of destroyers. This time, Yujin calculated the perfect angle and fired a shot that would ricochet off one ship's shields and strike another ship's weapons array. The weapons array exploded, sending debris flying into a third ship. That ship's automated defenses mistook the debris for an attack and fired back at its neighbor. Within seconds, 6 Dominion ships were shooting at each other. "All ships cease fire," Vex the Nor commanded. "You're hitting our own vessels." But the defiant spirit was already moving again. It phased through the hull of a massive dreadnought, appearing in the space between 2 battle groups. Junho had calculated the exact position where the dreadnought's own weapons would create a chain reaction if fired in the wrong direction. Sora transmitted a false targeting signal to the dreadnought's computers. For just a moment, the ship's weapons systems thought they were under attack from behind. They spun around and fired at what they thought was an enemy. The beam struck the reactor of a friendly ship. The explosion was visible across the entire formation. "What is happening?" Vex Thanor demanded. "How is one ship doing this?" His communications officer was frantically trying to coordinate the fleet, but the defiant spirit was moving too fast. It appeared in one location, fired a single precise shot, then vanished before anyone could respond. Each shot was perfectly calculated to cause maximum confusion and friendly fire. Wu Jin discovered something amazing about the Dominion ships. They were so large and so heavily armored that their crews had become careless. They assumed nothing could threaten them, so their defensive systems were designed to respond automatically to any damage. The systems didn't check whether the damage came from an enemy or a friend. "They're shooting themselves," he reported excitedly. "Every time we make one of them take damage, their computers assume they're under attack and start firing at whatever's nearby." The defiant spirit began to dance through the enemy formation like a ghost. It phased in and out of reality, appeared behind ships for split seconds, fired impossibly precise shots, then vanished again. Each shot caused more chaos, more confusion, more friendly fire. Navigator Yu Jin found she could predict the enemy's movements before they made them. Connected to the ship's quantum computers, she could process thousands of variables simultaneously, calculating exactly where each enemy ship would be and what they would do. "They're trying to spread out," she reported. "They want to avoid hitting each other." "Don't let them," Sora commanded. The defiant spirit suddenly appeared in the middle of a group of ships that were trying to move apart. Junho fired a spread of small charges, each one designed to detonate at a specific time and place. The charges created false sensor readings that made each ship think it was being targeted by its neighbors. Within minutes, the entire group was engaged in a massive firefight with itself. Vex the Nor watched in horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Ships were firing on each other. Explosions were rippling through his fleet, and he couldn't even see the enemy that was causing it all. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost over 200 ships to friendly fire, and we still haven't hit the human vessel once." "How is this possible?" Vex Thanor demanded. "It's just one ship." But it wasn't just one ship anymore. The defiant spirit had become something beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Its crew no longer thought like individual humans. They thought like a single organism, processing information at quantum speeds, predicting enemy movements with perfect accuracy. Sora could feel the entire battle in her mind at once. Every ship, every weapon, every possible outcome. She was no longer Captain Sora flying a ship. She was the ship, and the ship was her. "They're getting desperate," Junho observed. "They're starting to fire randomly, hoping to hit us." "Then let's use that," Sora said. The defiant spirit appeared directly between 2 massive dreadnoughts. Both ships immediately fired everything they had at the small human vessel. Sora waited until the last possible moment, then phased out. The 2 dreadnoughts' full firepower struck each other simultaneously. Both ships exploded in brilliant fireballs that took out a dozen smaller vessels around them. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. The defiant spirit would appear in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, cause maximum chaos with minimal effort, then vanish before the enemy could respond. "Sir," the communications officer reported to Vex the Nor, "we've lost over 1,000 ships. The formation is completely broken. Some ships are requesting permission to retreat." Vex the Nor couldn't believe what he was hearing. His invincible fleet was being destroyed by a single enemy vessel that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "This is impossible," he said again. No ship can move like that. No crew can think that fast, but he was wrong. The Defiant Spirit could move like that, and its crew could think that fast. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The battle that should have ended in minutes continued for hours. And slowly, impossibly, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history began to fall apart under the assault of humanity's single impossible ship. Fleet Admiral Byung-ho stood in Earth's command center, watching something that should have been impossible. On the main screen, the tactical display showed the Dominion fleet falling apart piece by piece. What had started as 8,000 ships in perfect formation was now scattered chaos. "Sir," said Lieutenant Min Seok from his station, "we're receiving reports from observation posts throughout the system. The enemy has lost over 3,000 ships to friendly fire." 3,000? Byung-ho could barely believe it. How many has the Defiant Spirit actually destroyed directly? 17, sir. But those 17 shots have caused chain reactions that destroyed the other 3,000. Byung-ho shook his head in amazement. Captain Sora and her crew were doing something that no military academy had ever taught. Something that went against every rule of space warfare. On the battlefield, the Defiant Spirit continued its impossible dance. Navigator Yu Jin had found a way to predict enemy movements up to 30 seconds in advance. By processing thousands of variables through the ship's quantum computers, she could see patterns that no human mind could understand. "Large group moving to flank position," she reported to the crew. "They're trying to surround an empty space and fire inward. They think we'll appear in the middle," said Engineer Wu Jin. "Should we disappoint them?" Captain Sora smiled, though her smile now existed only in the ship's consciousness. "Let's give them what they expect, but not the way they expect it." The Defiant Spirit phased into the center of the Dominion trap, exactly where the enemy commanders thought it would appear. 50 ships immediately fired everything they had at the small human vessel, but Sora had timed it perfectly. The ship appeared for exactly 1/10 of a second, just long enough to fire a single shot at a specific point in space. Then it phased out again. The shot struck an enemy missile that was already in flight. The missile exploded, creating a cloud of superheated metal fragments. The fragments spread outward just as the 50 surrounding ships fired their weapons. The weapons beams struck the metal fragments, which reflected and scattered the energy in random directions. Suddenly, the 50 ships found themselves being hit by their own weapons fire from completely unexpected angles. Commander Jun-ho watched the chaos unfold and felt a strange satisfaction. "They're learning to expect us everywhere, so they're shooting at everything. That just makes our job easier." Fleet Commander Vex Thanor was no longer standing calmly on his bridge. He was pacing back and forth, shouting orders that no one could follow because the enemy was moving too fast to track. "Where is it now?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," his sensor officer replied. "It phases out between attacks. We can't maintain a lock. Then fire everywhere. Fill the space with energy. It has to be solid when it attacks." Sub-Commander Thekvar looked at the tactical display with growing horror. "Sir, if we fire randomly, we'll hit more of our own ships. We're already hitting our own ships," Vex Thanor screamed. "That thing is making us destroy ourselves." He was right. The Defiant Spirit had discovered the Dominion's greatest weakness. Their ships were so large and their weapons so powerful that they couldn't fire safely when their own vessels were nearby. But their automated systems weren't smart enough to tell the difference between enemy fire and friendly fire. Every time the Defiant Spirit caused even minor damage to a Dominion ship, that ship's computers assumed it was under attack. The computers would automatically return fire at whatever they thought was the source of the attack. In the chaos of battle, that was usually another Dominion ship. Wu Jin had become expert at exploiting this weakness. "Watch this," he said to his crewmates. He fired a tiny projectile at a massive battleship's sensor array. The projectile did almost no damage, but it came from the direction of another Dominion vessel. The battleship's computers identified the attack and fired back immediately. Its massive weapon struck the other ship, which returned fire. Within seconds, both ships were shooting at each other with everything they had. "Beautiful," said Yu Jin. "We barely touched them, and now they're destroying each other." But the Defiant Spirit wasn't just causing random chaos. The crew had developed sophisticated tactics that turned the enemy fleet's own strength against itself. They would appear near a group of ships, cause specific types of damage that would trigger specific responses. then vanish while the enemy tore itself apart. Sora could feel the entire battle flowing through her consciousness like a river. She could see patterns emerging, weaknesses developing, opportunities appearing. The hybrid human-computer mind was capable of processing the battle at a level no biological intelligence could match. Major vulnerability forming in Sector 7, she reported. If we can get 3 specific ships to fire at each other simultaneously, we can cause a reactor cascade. On it, said Junho. He calculated the exact sequence of shots needed to trigger the cascade. The Defiant Spirit appeared behind the first ship and fired a single shot that damaged its communication array. The ship tried to call for help, but its message was garbled. The second ship interpreted the garbled message as a threat and fired on the first ship. The first ship's reactor overloaded from the damage and began venting plasma. The plasma cloud drifted toward the third ship, which mistook it for a weapon attack. It fired into the plasma cloud, causing a massive explosion that destroyed all 3 ships and damaged 6 others. Back on Earth, the human fleet watched in amazement as their single ship systematically dismantled the largest invasion force in galactic history. "Sir," said Communications Officer Sungmin to Admiral Taemin, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Other civilizations are watching this battle. They can't believe what they're seeing." Taemin nodded. If humanity won this battle, it would change everything. For the first time in 2 centuries, someone was defeating the Dominion. But if they lost, it would be the end of Earth. "How many enemy ships are left?" he asked. "Approximately 4,000, sir. But their formation is completely broken. They're scattered across the system, many of them damaged." On the Dominion flagship, Vex Thenor was beginning to understand that this wasn't just a military defeat. This was something that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. "How can one ship do this?" he asked Thekvar. "It doesn't make sense." "Sir," said the tactical officer, "I think I understand what's happening. The human ship isn't fighting us directly. It's making us fight ourselves." "What do you mean?" "Every time it attacks, it triggers our automated defense systems. But our systems can't tell the difference between enemy fire and friendly fire. We end up shooting at each other." Vex Thanor stared at the tactical display. His perfect fleet was now spread across the solar system in small, confused groups. Many ships were still firing at each other, convinced they were under attack by their own allies. "Can we override the automated systems?" he asked. "We've tried, sir, but the ship moves too fast. By the time we identify it and manually target it, it's already gone." The Defiant Spirit had become something beyond a normal warship. It was like a virus in the enemy fleet's computer networks, causing them to turn on each other. But it was also something more fundamental than that. We're not just fighting them, Sora realized. We're teaching them that their way of war doesn't work. For 2 centuries, the Dominion had conquered through overwhelming force. Massive fleets, enormous weapons, brute strength applied without subtlety. Every civilization they had faced tried to match them force for force and failed. But humanity was doing something different. They weren't matching the Dominion's strength. They were making that strength irrelevant. "Sir," the communications officer reported to Vex Thanor, "some of our ships are requesting permission to retreat. They say they can't tell who they're supposed to be fighting." Vex Thanor looked at the chaos on his screens. Ships firing randomly, explosions lighting up space, his carefully planned invasion dissolving into madness. "Sir," Tekvar said quietly, "maybe we should consider withdrawal. This isn't working." Vex Thanor had never retreated from a battle in his entire career. He had never even considered it. The Dominion didn't retreat. They conquered. But as he watched another group of his ships destroy each other in friendly fire, he began to understand that this battle was already lost. The question was whether he could save any of his fleet. "Prepare for withdrawal," he said quietly. But the Defiant Spirit had been monitoring their communications. Sora knew what they were planning. "They're trying to run," she told her crew. "Should we let them?" The crew considered this. They had already achieved the impossible. They had defeated the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. Earth was safe, but Junho had a different thought. If we let them escape, they'll just come back with a different strategy. Maybe we should make sure they understand that coming back isn't an option. Sora agreed. It was time to send a message that the galaxy would never forget. The final phase of the battle was about to begin. The silence that followed the battle was louder than any explosion. Across the solar system, the wreckage of the Dominion fleet drifted in space like the bones of some massive beast. Of the 8,000 ships that had arrived to conquer humanity, fewer than 200 remained intact. Captain Sora felt strange as the defiant spirit floated among the debris. Her consciousness was still merged with the ship's systems, but the battle rush was fading. For the first time in hours, she had time to think about what they had accomplished. "Status report," she said to her crew. "All enemy vessels have either been destroyed or have surrendered," reported Commander Junho. "The Dominion flagship is requesting permission to communicate." Engineer Wu Jin's voice carried a note of amazement. "We did it. We actually did it. One ship against 8,000 and we won." Navigator Yu Jin was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving messages from dozens of civilizations. Word of the battle is spreading fast." On Earth, Dr. Mi-young worked frantically in her laboratory. The consciousness transfer system had worked perfectly during the battle, but now she faced a new challenge. How do you separate human minds from a computer system they've been merged with for days? "The good news is that they're all still alive," she told Dr. Kai-young. "The bad news is that they're not entirely human anymore." Kai-young looked at the readings from the defiant spirit. "What do you mean?" "I mean, their consciousness has expanded beyond normal human limits. They can still think and feel like humans, but they can also process information like computers. They exist in both states simultaneously." The implications were staggering. The crew of the defiant spirit had become something new, a hybrid of human creativity and computer precision. They were still the same people, but they were also something more. Admiral Taemin received the communication request from the Dominion flagship. He looked at Fleet Admiral Byung-ho, who nodded. "Put them through," Taemin said. Fleet Commander Vex Thanor appeared on the screen. The proud alien commander who had arrived expecting an easy conquest now looked broken and defeated. "I request permission to speak with whoever commands your forces," Vex Thanor said. "You're speaking to us," Taemin replied. "I don't understand what happened here," Vex Thanor said. "We brought the largest fleet in galactic history. We have weapons that can destroy planets. How did one small ship defeat us?" Taemin looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of the enemy fleet. "Because you assumed we would fight your kind of war. You expected massive fleets and conventional tactics. You didn't expect us to change the rules. What you did. It shouldn't be possible." "Many things shouldn't be possible," Taemin said. "Faster than light travel shouldn't be possible. Artificial intelligence shouldn't be possible. But we make them possible anyway." The defiant spirit approached the Dominion flagship. Captain Sora opened a communication channel. "Fleet Commander Vex Thanor," she said. Her voice came from the ship's speakers, carrying an otherworldly quality that made it clear she was no longer entirely human. "You," Vex Thanor said. "You commanded that ship." "I am that ship," Sora corrected. "And I have a message for you to take back to your empire." "What message?" "Tell them that humanity does not surrender. Tell them that we don't fight the way others fight. Tell them that if they come back, we'll be ready for them." Vex Thanor stared at the image of the small human ship that had destroyed his fleet. "What are you?" "We're what happens when you push too hard against something that refuses to break," Sora said. "We're what happens when people decide that the old rules don't apply anymore." The remaining Dominion ships began their long journey home, carrying news that would shake their empire to its core. For the first time in 2 centuries, they had been defeated. Not just defeated, but humiliated by a single enemy vessel. On Earth, the celebration was unlike anything in human history. People danced in the streets, cried with relief, and looked up at the stars with new hope. They had faced extinction and survived. More than that, they had won. But in the research laboratories, Dr. Mi-young faced a difficult decision. The crew of the Defiant Spirit could be separated from the ship's computer systems, but they would lose the abilities that had made victory possible. Or they could remain merged with the ship, keeping their enhanced capabilities but never being fully human again. "What do you want to do?" she asked Captain Sora over the communication link. Sora was quiet for a long moment. Around her, she could feel the presence of her crew, their minds linked with hers and with the ship itself. They had become something new, something that had never existed before. "We want to stay," she said finally. "This is what we are now. This is what we chose to become." "But you'll never be able to return to normal human life," Mi-young said. "Normal human life was going to end if we hadn't done this," Junho pointed out. We saved humanity by becoming something more than human. I think that's a fair trade. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's victory spread like wildfire. Civilizations that had accepted Dominion rule as inevitable suddenly began to hope again. If humanity could defeat the invincible fleet with one ship, maybe others could find their own ways to fight back. President Namsu addressed the world from the United Nations building. Today, humanity proved that we don't have to accept the way things are. We don't have to bow to superior force. We can find new ways, better ways, impossible ways. The speech was broadcast to every human settlement, from the cities of Earth to the mining colonies of the asteroid belt. But it was also picked up by alien civilizations across the galaxy, translated into hundreds of languages, and shared among species that had thought resistance was hopeless. Within months, the first rebellion against Dominion rule began in the Kepler sector. The rebels didn't have the technology to build ships like the Defiant Spirit, but they had learned the lesson of humanity's victory. They didn't need to match Dominion strength. They needed to make that strength irrelevant. Admiral Taemin was promoted to Supreme Commander of the newly formed Galactic Liberation Alliance. His first task was to help other civilizations develop their own unconventional warfare tactics. Every species has different strengths, he explained to a gathering of rebel leaders. The key is to find what makes you unique and use that instead of trying to copy what others have done. The crystalline hegemony began developing ships that could shatter into thousands of pieces and reform, making them impossible to target effectively. The quantum architects shared their reality-bending technology with other species, creating weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the most important change wasn't technological. It was psychological. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's civilizations began to believe that the Dominion could be defeated. Dr. Ki Young established the Institute for Unconventional Warfare, where scientists and military strategists from dozens of species worked together to develop new ways of fighting. The goal wasn't to build bigger weapons or stronger shields. The goal was to make conventional warfare obsolete. The Dominion's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, she explained to her students. They're so good at traditional warfare that they can't adapt when someone changes the rules. Years passed. The Dominion tried several more invasions, but each one failed in a different way. Humanity and its allies had learned to think beyond conventional tactics. They used the enemy's expectations against them, turned their strengths into weaknesses, and fought wars that couldn't be won through brute force alone. The Defiant Spirit became a legend, patrolling the galaxy as a symbol of hope. Captain Sora and her crew, now permanently merged with their ship, served as guardians and teachers. They helped other civilizations learn to think differently about warfare and conflict. We're not just fighting the Dominion, Sora explained to a group of young pilots. We're fighting the idea that might makes right. We're proving that intelligence and creativity are more powerful than any weapon. The galaxy was changing. The old empires that ruled through fear and overwhelming force were crumbling. In their place, new alliances formed based on cooperation and mutual support. Fleet Commander Vex Thanor, now a prisoner of war on a remote Dominion planet, often thought about the Battle of Sol. He had spent his entire career believing that the strongest fleet always won. Humanity had taught him that strength meant nothing if you couldn't use it effectively. In his prison cell, he wrote reports that would never be sent, analyzing how one small ship had destroyed his massive fleet. The more he studied the battle, the more he understood that humanity hadn't just won a military victory. They had changed the fundamental nature of conflict itself. The Dominion still existed, but it was no longer the unstoppable force it had once been. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds. Former subject species declared independence. The empire that had seemed eternal was finally showing cracks. And at the center of it all was humanity's impossible ship, the Defiant Spirit. Proof that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from meeting force with force, but from refusing to fight by the enemy's rules at all. Captain Sora often thought about the moment when everything changed. It wasn't when they fired their first shot or won their first battle. It was when they decided that the old ways didn't have to be the only ways. Every empire fell.